In the heart of a bustling city sat the illustrious Silver Oaks Hotel, a luxurious establishment renowned for its opulent design and celebrity clientele. From the outside, it gleamed with sophistication, but behind the scenes, not everyone was treated with the same shine. Beneath its pristine facade worked an elderly janitor named Thomas. Thomas had spent over 3 decades working tirelessly to keep the hotel's marble floors spotless, its bathrooms pristine, and hallways shining for guests who hardly noticed his presence. The soft creases on his face told the story of a man who had spent a lifetime laboring to make ends meet. He was a proud man, carrying himself with quiet dignity, even as years of scrubbing floors had taken a toll on his back and joints. The hotel's new manager, a sharp and arrogant man named Daniel Harlow, had little patience for people he deemed beneath him. Tall and impeccably dressed, Daniel ruled the hotel with an iron fist, often belittling staff to assert his dominance. For Thomas, Daniel's arrival marked the beginning of daily torment. Whether it was berating him in front of others for missing a smudge or snapping at him for not mopping fast enough, Daniel seemed to take a sick pleasure in humiliating the elderly janitor. One particular rainy afternoon, the hotel's grand lobby was abuzz with guests arriving for a high-profile charity gala. Among the guests, unbeknownst to anyone, was none other than Johnny Depp. Dressed inconspicuously in a black hat and coat, Johnny had entered the hotel quietly, hoping to escape the prying eyes of fans and paparazzi. He was there for some quiet time before the event and had slipped into a secluded restroom near the lobby's far end. At the same time, Thomas had just begun his routine rounds, pushing his old janitor cart down the marble hallway. His hands trembled slightly from years of arthritis, but he moved with the steady rhythm of someone who had done this work 1,000 times before. As he entered the bathroom, he didn't notice Johnny quietly tucked away in one of the stalls, scrolling his phone. Moments later, Daniel stormed into the restroom, his polished shoes echoing sharply against the tiles. "What are you doing in here, Thomas?" Daniel barked, his voice cutting through the silence. Thomas looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and surprise. "Just cleaning, sir. Like always," he said, his voice calm and measured. Daniel scoffed loudly, shaking his head with mock disbelief. "Cleaning? Do you call this clean?" He pointed to an imaginary stain on the floor. Thomas frowned slightly, leaning forward to look. "Sir, I think—" "Don't think, Thomas," Daniel snapped. "People like you don't get paid to think. You get paid to scrub and mop. And judging by this filth, even that's too much for you." Johnny, still seated silently in the stall, froze. His ears perked up at Daniel's tone. He could hear the venom dripping from each word. Curiosity replaced his focus, and he listened carefully. Thomas's shoulders slumped slightly, but he kept his composure. "Sir, I've been cleaning these floors for over 30 years. 30 years of doing what exactly? Making them look worse?" Daniel interrupted, smirking cruelly. "Maybe it's time we got someone younger, someone who knows what they're doing, because clearly you're useless." Thomas paused, his breath catching in his throat. For the first time, Johnny could hear a crack in his voice. "Sir, I do my best," Thomas said quietly. "Your best? Don't embarrass yourself, Thomas," Daniel sneered, looking him up and down with distaste. "You don't belong in a hotel like this. You're an eyesore, and the sooner you're gone, the better." Johnny, still hidden from view, clenched his jaw. The sharp injustice in Daniel's words sent a jolt of anger through him. He wasn't one to step into confrontations, but something about the manager's blatant disrespect left him fuming. Before Thomas could respond, Daniel turned on his heel and walked briskly out of the restroom, leaving the janitor standing in stunned silence. Thomas's shaking hands gripped the handle of his mop as he exhaled slowly, steadying himself. Once the coast was clear, Johnny emerged from the stall. His iconic features softened into concern as he approached the elderly janitor. Thomas glanced up in surprise, eyes widening slightly. "Sir, I didn't realize someone was here," Thomas said, quickly standing straight. Johnny shook his head, holding up a hand to stop him. "You don't need to apologize," Johnny said kindly. His voice was calm but firm. "Are you all right?" Thomas hesitated, clearly embarrassed by the earlier confrontation. "It's nothing, sir. Just part of the job, I suppose." Johnny frowned, his eyes studying the janitor's face. He could see the weariness etched into every line. "No one deserves to be spoken to that way," Johnny replied softly. "No one." Thomas offered a faint, tired smile, brushing it off. "I'm used to it." As the hotel owner stormed off, visibly agitated, the elderly janitor quietly picked up his supplies, his face showing a mix of pain and resignation. Little did he know that Johnny Depp, still hidden in the stall, had witnessed the entire exchange. He stayed silent for a moment, processing what he had just seen. Then determination flashed across Johnny's face. He had seen enough and wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. The janitor continued his duties, scrubbing floors and ensuring everything was spotless, though his movements were slower and more strained than before. His years of hard work and dedication to the hotel were evident in his meticulous efforts, yet it was clear that the owner's harsh words weighed heavily on him. Other staff members passed by without acknowledgement. No one intervened. No one offered help. Johnny exited the restroom, his iconic sunglasses in hand, and began to ask the front desk staff about the janitor. "What's his name? How long has he worked here?" The employees hesitated, clearly uncomfortable under Johnny's curious and serious demeanor, but eventually they answered. The janitor's name was Harold, and he had been a part of the hotel's staff for nearly 30 years. 30 years? "And that's how he's treated?" Johnny whispered to himself, his voice filled with disbelief and anger. Harold, meanwhile, was in the storage room, sorting through supplies. Alone and unaware of the stir occurring outside, he sat on a small stool, stretching his tired legs and sighing deeply. His hands, worn and cracked from decades of cleaning chemicals, rested in his lap. Memories of better days played in his mind. Back when the hotel was new, the management was kind, and the work, though hard, felt rewarding. Suddenly, Johnny walked in, startling Harold. "Excuse me," Johnny said gently. Harold looked up, his eyes widening as he realized who stood before him. "Johnny Depp," he stammered, his voice full of disbelief. Johnny smiled warmly. "Yeah, that's me. But listen, I saw what happened earlier, and I want to help. You don't deserve to be treated like that." Harold shook his head, embarrassed. "Oh, sir, it's nothing. I'm used to it. I just do my job." But Johnny wasn't having it. Used to it? No one should ever be used to being treated like they don't matter. You've given your life to this place, and that deserves respect. Johnny sat down next to Harold and listened as the elderly man, hesitant at first, began to open up about his years at the hotel, the good and the bad. Harold spoke of how he had started there as a young man, his dreams of building a stable future, and how those dreams had slowly faded with time. Yet he stayed because he needed the job and cared deeply about the hotel. Meanwhile, word began to spread among the staff that Johnny Depp was talking to Harold. The hotel owner, catching wind of this, suddenly seemed nervous. He rushed back to the janitor's area, trying to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Depp, is there a problem?" the owner asked, forcing a smile. Johnny stood up slowly, his calm but firm presence filling the room. "Yeah, there is," Johnny replied. "You don't know how to treat the people who've built this place up for you. This man has dedicated 30 years of his life to your success, and you think it's okay to humiliate him?" The owner opened his mouth to respond, but Johnny cut him off. "You know what? I have an idea. Follow me." Without waiting for a response, Johnny gestured for Harold to come along, and together they walked out to the hotel lobby, where guests and staff were starting to gather, whispering among themselves. Johnny cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have a moment of your time? I want you to meet someone very important. This is Harold, and for the last 30 years, he has been the backbone of this hotel." Harold looked shocked and overwhelmed as Johnny continued, his voice filled with admiration and respect. "While others come and go, Harold has worked tirelessly to ensure that everything here runs smoothly. It's people like him who deserve recognition, not insults or disrespect." The crowd began to clap, slowly at first, but soon it grew into a standing ovation. Guests who had stayed at the hotel for years realized they had seen Harold countless times, working quietly in the background, and they joined in, cheering and clapping. Tears welled up in Harold's eyes as he stood there, humbled and speechless. The hotel owner, red-faced and clearly uncomfortable, tried to smile and save face. But Johnny wasn't done yet. As the standing ovation echoed throughout the hotel lobby, Harold stood frozen, overwhelmed by the outpouring of appreciation. Years of quiet, thankless service had made him almost invisible to those around him. But now, in this unexpected moment, he was the center of attention. His hands trembled as he wiped a tear from his cheek, his voice catching as he tried to speak. Johnny Depp turned toward Harold and placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "Harold, you deserve this and more. This isn't just about today. It's about all the years you've worked hard while being overlooked." Harold looked at Johnny and shook his head humbly. "I was just doing my job," he muttered, but Johnny smiled warmly. "No, Harold. You've been doing far more than that. You've been holding this place together." The hotel owner, still red-faced and nervous, stepped forward. He tried to inject himself into the moment, plastering on a forced smile. "Yes, well, Harold here is a valued member of our team. I've been meaning to recognize his hard work for a while now." The crowd's clapping quieted as the attention shifted toward the owner. People exchanged skeptical glances, clearly not buying the insincerity dripping from his words. Johnny raised an eyebrow and crossed his arms, his stance calm but firm. "Really? That's interesting because earlier today, I saw you mocking him, belittling him in front of others. Is that how you show value around here?" The owner faltered, his face paling. "Well, he stammered. Johnny cut him off with a slight shake of his head. "Enough. Actions speak louder than words." The gathered guests and hotel staff murmured in agreement. The whispers grew louder as people began to realize how poorly Harold had been treated over the years. Some of the regulars in the crowd stepped forward, recounting times they had seen Harold hard at work, mopping floors, fixing broken items, and always greeting people with a quiet kindness. A younger staff member spoke up, her voice full of guilt. "I should have said something earlier. Harold, you've always been so kind to all of us. I'm sorry for not standing up for you before." Tears welled up again in Harold's eyes as he looked around, touched by the unexpected support. He was a man who had lived in the shadows of the hotel for decades, unnoticed and underappreciated. But now the spotlight was on him in the best way possible. Johnny stepped closer and smiled reassuringly. "It's not too late to change things. Harold, let's make this right." Turning back to the hotel owner, Johnny's demeanor shifted slightly. His calm exterior now carried an unmistakable weight of authority. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to make things right with Harold. Starting now." The owner blinked, stunned. "What do you mean?" Johnny didn't miss a beat. "First, you're going to publicly recognize Harold's 30 years of service. Not just a verbal apology, but a proper tribute. Second, you're going to ensure Harold is fairly compensated for all he's given to this place. And third, you're going to learn a lesson about how to treat the people who work for you." The owner's mouth opened to argue, but the crowd's response was instant, more clapping, cheering, and shouts of agreement. He realized he was outnumbered, his reputation at stake, and slowly nodded. "Fine," he muttered reluctantly. "We'll arrange something." But Johnny wasn't finished. "One more thing," he said, his voice softening as he turned back to Harold. "Harold, what do you want? After all this time, what would make you happy?" Harold stared at Johnny, stunned. No one had ever asked him that before. He took a shaky breath, looking down at his worn shoes. I want to be treated with respect. That's all I ever wanted." The simplicity of his words struck a chord in everyone present. Johnny smiled warmly. "Then respect is what you'll get, Harold. Starting today, this place will remember your name and your work. You're not invisible. You never were." In the days that followed, Johnny's actions became a story that traveled far beyond the walls of the hotel. News outlets picked it up, sharing the video of Harold's standing ovation and Johnny Depp's heartfelt defense of the elderly janitor. Harold's story became an inspiration to millions, a reminder that kindness, hard work, and dignity matter more than wealth or status. The hotel was forced to issue a formal apology to Harold, not only recognizing his decades of service, but also presenting him with a well-deserved promotion and a raise. Guests began to actively thank Harold whenever they saw him, treating him as the valued human being he was. And as for Johnny Depp, he quietly slipped away, refusing the media attention, content to know that he had made a difference in one man's life. Harold, though still a humble janitor at heart, now carried himself differently. For the first time in years, he felt seen, respected, and proud of the life he had lived. As he cleaned the hotel floors one morning, a guest stopped to shake his hand. "Thank you for everything you do, Harold." Harold smiled, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for noticing." And somewhere, Johnny Depp, sitting quietly in a cafe far away, smiled too, knowing he had helped restore dignity to a man who truly deserved it. In the weeks following Johnny Depp's intervention, Harold's life underwent a transformation he never thought possible. The quiet, overlooked janitor had become something of a local legend. Guests who visited the hotel would ask for him by name, shaking his hand, thanking him for his decades of dedication. Staff members who had once hurried past him without a glance now stopped to chat, offering to help him carry supplies or simply asking how his day was going. Harold, still the same humble man he had always been, could hardly believe the shift. The hotel itself took swift action, not out of true remorse, but because the story had spread like wildfire. News outlets covered the incident, and videos of Johnny Depp's heartfelt speech circulated on social media, garnering millions of views. The hotel management, desperate to salvage their reputation, organized a formal event in Harold's honor. They set up a small stage in the lobby, lined with decorations and flowers, and sent out invitations to loyal guests and the local community. When Harold arrived that day, wearing a neatly pressed suit he hadn't put on in years, the sight that greeted him nearly took his breath away. The lobby, once just another space he silently maintained, was packed with people, guests, staff, and even old friends who had heard about the event. At the front of the crowd stood Johnny Depp, smiling warmly, a quiet nod of encouragement as Harold stepped up to the stage. The hotel owner, who had been pushed into organizing the event, tried to appear gracious, presenting Harold with a plaque of recognition for his dedicated 30 years of service. Harold accepted it with a polite smile, but the real honor came when Johnny took the microphone. "This isn't just about a plaque," Johnny began, his voice steady and sincere. "This is about recognizing people like Harold, people who work hard behind the scenes, who rarely get the credit they deserve. Without Harold, this hotel would not be what it is today." The crowd erupted into applause, and Harold's face lit up with emotion. Johnny continued, "Harold isn't just a janitor. He's a symbol of perseverance, humility, and kindness. He's shown us that dignity isn't defined by the job you do, but by how you do it. And Harold, you've done it with grace for 3 decades." Harold's eyes brimmed with tears as he stepped forward to speak. The room fell silent as the elderly man gripped the microphone, his hands shaking slightly. "I don't know what to say," he began, his voice soft but clear. "For so long, I thought my work didn't matter. I thought I didn't matter. But all of you being here today, it's more than I could have ever asked for." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I don't need recognition or plaques. All I ever wanted was respect. And I hope this reminds people to see others around them. We all have a story. We all matter." The room erupted again into applause, with some people wiping away tears. Johnny walked up to Harold, shaking his hand firmly. "You've earned this," he whispered, and Harold smiled, his gratitude evident. As the event came to a close, Johnny quietly pulled Harold aside. "Listen," Johnny said, his tone serious. "I've been thinking, you've spent 30 years taking care of this place, but who's taking care of you?" Harold looked at him curiously. Johnny continued, "I have a friend who runs a community project, helping people like you retire comfortably without worrying about finances. I'd like to set something up for you." Harold's eyes widened in shock. "Oh no, Mr. Depp, you don't have to." Johnny held up a hand, silencing him gently. "Harold, this isn't charity. It's gratitude. People like you make the world a better place, and you deserve to enjoy the time you have left." Harold's voice trembled as he whispered, "Thank you. Thank you so much." A few months later, Harold finally retired from the hotel, leaving behind decades of quiet, unappreciated work. But this time, His exit was different. Staff and guests threw him a farewell party, showering him with appreciation and kind words. When Harold walked out those hotel doors for the last time, he did so with his head held high, knowing that he had finally been seen and valued. Johnny Depp, who had quietly ensured Harold's future was secure, disappeared from the public eye once again, just as he always did. But his actions left ripples that continued to spread far and wide. News outlets hailed the story as a powerful reminder of kindness, humility, and standing up for what is right. People around the world began to share their own stories of underappreciated workers, sparking a movement to recognize those often overlooked. As for Harold, he spent his days in peace, tending to a small garden behind his modest home and occasionally volunteering at a local community center. He never forgot Johnny Depp's words or the day his life changed forever. Every now and then, as he sat quietly in his garden, he would look up at the sky and smile, whispering a simple, heartfelt, "Thank you." And somewhere out in the world, Johnny Depp carried on with his life, knowing that sometimes it only takes one small act of kindness to remind someone of their worth.